Hello, welcome to this podcast to know where brainstorming session. This is sort of the third part, or more, perhaps even. It could have been the fourth part. Who cares, right? Speaking on the truths within math and math being alive, numbers, living word, living numbers, Mother Nature, all of these kinds of things. And I'm going to pick it back up where I left off in this sort of cliffhanger yesterday, or the other day actually. Yesterday in my memory now, a couple of days ago. It's May 19th, 2025 today. Just to timestamp this for my own personal reference or for anyone who cares. I am going to sort of pick it back up where I left off with Mother Nature's or organic matrix. Sometimes I like to just call it the organic matrix. The truths of the system, the laws that are at play and working through the numbers. Because I think when we understand that there's a basis of happenings, there's purpose and truth and direction to the functionality, to the processes and equations, then we can plug in the variables, talk about numbers after. But it's better to understand in language and in true, honest, the core happenings, the foundation, before we really talk about the numbers. So I'm drinking my coffee this morning, trying to fit this in early before homeschool. Thank you for listening and giving me your ear and heart and soul to listen to. As always, I appreciate anybody's intake or points of view. If anybody has anything to say or comments, feel free to leave them, send me messages. All the good stuff is in the descriptions if anybody is ever wishing to reach me directly. So, to pick it back up, I'm not really going to reiterate what I've already talked about, which is sort of how the spiraling creates smoothness and beauty and easy transitions, fluidity, niceness. This thing I'm calling imperfect sharing. And that's why the Mother Nature, I talked a lot about feminine energy, so already in the sort of dual happenings of our reality and everything in the previous episode. So if you're interested in this and you've just found me, you should definitely take a listen to part 1, because I'm not going to really talk about the golden mean, as in the average, the turning and spiraling, the energy exchange that's being displayed, why you would seek to find this number, right? Everyone's like, talks about the number, talks about these intricacies about it, or looking for visual representations of it everywhere, measuring against it to confirm the numbers and the measurements. But if we would actually just look and peel back the layer of what's happening and see the essence really behind it, there's so much there. So I'm not going to, I'm not going to talk about the math of the mean, the average ratio, why it's a nice middle point, and all that. I kind of expressed that in the last part 1 of this sort of Fibonacci sequence, phi specific episodes that I'm doing, these 2 here, I guess. The second portion of what phi is, or what the golden ratio represents, is sort of is not about the spiral, but it's in fact about the building, the numbers, the accumulation, the happenings that the numbers represent, the sequence. When we say 0, 1, 1 plus 0 is 1, 1 plus 1 is 2, 1 plus 2 is 3, 2 plus 3 is 5, 3 plus 5 is 8, and what we're doing there to get the numbers, right? This is a whole other subject of the school of what's happening with this, and they get jammed together. And it's like if we took the time to separate them and look at them and see what different truths they're actually displaying, it makes it even more beautiful. It doesn't change anything about it. I'm not trying to say it's not, I'm just trying to create moreness, more pixelation in the image here for us to discover the beauty and watch it again and see there's more depth, see the Easter eggs, see we've missed this. These are additions that were always there to begin with that we have seen as separate, or especially I have seen as separate. Perhaps, I'm not saying the first person to ever talk about this or do this. I'm just saying in my own life, I am me. I live my life through my eyes, and I'm at the forefront of my own knowledge. So for me, this is a culmination of those things. But this is another aspect of Mother Nature's divine feminine energies and what we do with the leftovers. How we can move without stopping, without accumulating stuff, crap, trash. And again, with the spiral and the seeking of truth, we're not having these strict angular bend 90-degree angles, or even a visible angle that creates this sharp ugliness, lies, and negativity. Those corners create the places for the shadow to accumulate and grow in. But when we are, seeking truth and moving through things, everything smooths out, and the gradient is almost imperceptible, right? And so how do we do that? How can we keep that flow going? I already talked a bit about what the flow means to beauty and all that behind that in the previous episode, so I'm not going to go there now. But what I'm going to talk about now is the strict building of it. And this is what comes into, the square that is on or reflected within and on top of or drawn with the spiral. Now, in organic archons steal this over and use it as an overlay to build their architecture of the spiraling happenings, the emotions, the different layer of a whole other angle. But they anchor them together. They force them into this one thing, and so they gain sort of control over the picture, the whole happenings, instead of us being able to move freely through these two and understand how different they really are, because we can gain great momentum and do great work when we understand how problem solving and troubleshooting and innovation and thinking, we're creator consciousness, mankind, humans, aren't we? We're builders, we're solvers, we're makers, we're doers, but we're also great internal beings of inner mind. We're thinkers and sitters. We contemplate, we build within, right? So we have to remember that numbers and everything we're thinking and doing, they have these dual aspects as well. And kind of when we get caught up in just the visual of beautiful golden ratio reflecting beauty in the spiral, and just the sort of coincidence of the convenience of how nature builds, it's there's divine purpose behind it, that is important. And it also reflects, like I was saying before, about how we move through, and about how quote-unquote Mother Nature or the organic matrix never has trash and always makes new of what it has, and always has a use for what it has. And if it doesn't, it has this very, if it doesn't have a direct delegatory purpose of the things at that moment, it has a vast space in 3D, Earth, to hold the minerals, to hold the molecules, to hold the soil, to hold the rock, to hold the people, so there's always, first of all, there's a creation of dimensionality in space that happens with the squaring or the doubling or the adding together. I'm not saying that it's an actual square, so I'm not talking about, exponents right now. I'm talking about physical shape of the square. Now, of course, with comes dimensionality, third dimensionality in the square, right? Or the cube, rather, when we're talking about in 3 dimensions. But even 2D in a square, we have corners now, right? Okay, so this is what I said before about they play on these two models, and the inorganic matrix sort of binds together these seemingly fluidly co-partners that the organic matrix defines, and they sort of enslave them together, and they just say, no, you're not like free-flowing co-partners to intermingle and do whatever you want and these different things you're good at, but no, they make them sort of the same. And we think, oh, what a coincidence, oh, the numbers just add up to that, and oh, isn't that spooky, and oh, like it's but it's not really even spooky. It just makes complete sense. It's total common sense. So back to the sort of idea of Mother Nature here, making something out of everything. The organic matrix is, nothing's ever lost, and we see this in just the regular organic cycles of all of the different life we have in the kingdoms, right? Biology. And there's all of these different phases that different organic life represents. And so even there's things, that eat up and dispose of the dead things, and there's new life that comes out of that. So nothing's ever lost. Nothing is ever garbage, really, or useless to the organic potentiality matrix. Now, have you never heard me talk about the potentiality matrix, or what I really think organic ether model could be represented as in an array or a matrix of sorts through an ether? Sort of, it's a 1 to 9 model. We have a binary model with 0, 1, 0, 1, and then we have quantum computers that are attempting to hold a dual potentiality and the expansiveness created just in that space alone. Now we're talking 9 numbers that I think organic matrix holds potentiality at each exchange for. So anyway, just to say, for people who could think about the gambling, the probabilities, the possibilities, really, it's that expansive. And of course it looks infinite to our mind, and then look at how they think they've created infinity in this quantumness with their artificial intelligence and their reproductions and their clonings and their copying in their inorganic inversions. It's like, it's laughable. I said this maybe in a different episode, but it's like when you put on those silly goofy glasses that have a mustache and a giant nose and the big glasses, and you want to act like you're somebody else. Like, no, you're quite obviously not. But anyway, let's just talk about the math here. I'm getting off on tangents that probably are not desirable. The way that the spiral can work and energy can be moving through this so fluidly and nicely in a positive flow, eternally ever flowing, and spiraling towards that center point. The center point I find is truth, great logos, DNA instructions, the infinite source point, the sun, whatever you want to call the center of the universe, your source point. The spiraling seeks that and goes around that. And so when we are not following our truth, when we are seeking control, infringement, negative alignments and systems in our lives, we start bending our light for self-gratification, for self-service, or in servitude to others because they've bent theirs, and we go along with their systems and negativity and enslave ourselves in that kind of way. We create these inorganic bendings of light that unfortunately follow the 3D model that building in our lives, the numbers really reflect. And so we get easily tricked into this. This is what I'm talking about with them being these two different things. One of them's meant for thinking and emotions. One of them's meant for physical life and building and emotions and stuff. But we just get sort of jammed into this one vision of it all. Right, and that we lose control. We lose our power of choice and change and get wrapped up into negative systems and end up slaves more likely because of this. So, I mean, it really does have a purpose, and it really does benefit you to know about it and just to switch gears, because you won't be bending your light as much, and you'll get closer to this good momentum of seeking your own truth in good ways, and better things happen, more light travels through. And you realize this momentum that I'm talking about keeping up this, when there's no harsh angles for things to catch on, you create a great momentum. But what needs to happen with that is you have to learn to let go, live and let go, and to not worry about the future either. It's living in the now moment. And so there is not a space of accumulation. There's no hoarding. There's no corners for dust to catch in. You don't have a closet for 27 outfits. So you don't have a walk-in closet, right? You have to keep just 7 outfits, one for each day of the week, and honor that and live in that, not fearfully, and not in an overly sacrificial way where it's sort of like, your poor me pity party. I only have 7 things, but I'm going to live this tragic life because this is the good meek life to God, or anything like that. Like, it's not about any of that, actually. It's about, I don't need any more than that. And not that I don't need any more because I'm taking away from others if I had more either. It has nothing to do with the external when you say, I don't need any more than that. It's because you don't need any more than that. And you're perfectly comfortable with the things in front of you. And you only have time for those things in front of you. We can only do one thing at once. We can only be and look at one thing. We can only be one person. Excuse me. Right? And this is a great law and truth that we should live by, but we haven't, because negativity runs everything. And when you get into this and you live in this sort of free-flowing, lighter life, you can really understand the light and understand moving through and why it's important, and it's actually freer. It's alive, and you never lack, and you never need, actually. And it becomes quite miraculous the way that it works, and the ways that things come to you, the ways that which has accumulated, somebody else will need something, and then you're like, oh, I have this extra thing and I didn't even know why. And here it's absolutely fantastic. It's phenomenal, the way that the universe intelligence works, that free service works, and through the external reality, through third parties, through this other notion of knowing. People call it God, anything that you want, infinite intelligence, the ether. I think there's a couple of dimensionalities to it, but I'm not going to get into that at this moment. I've talked about it other times anyway. So if you're not new to my channel, then you probably already sort of have heard my view on this setup in generalities. Somehow I always get drawn into them, even when I'm trying to be specific, like today. But back to specifics. So how do we do this? How do we move through it? Well, numbers show us, and organic nature plays out the numbers and math so wonderfully for us that we get the more tangible definition. What numbers show us basically is, it's like a sewing pattern. The cut, the measurements of the neck, the collar, the arms, those things, they vary by person, they vary by animal, they vary by system and structure, by purpose defined, right? So there's a certain quote-unquote cut available. And I talked about this in the previous episode, but I used sort of a color by numbers variety of explanations. But there's already designation. But within the designation becomes infinite tailor-fitting to personal likenesses, weaknesses, and affinities, because each one is its own infinite discovery of what that means. By definition for the creator, infinity seeks to define itself in every definite point that it could possibly make, to find itself more clearly. And we each do this in our own fractalized, unique, individualized way, but organic nature does this and is playing this out in a miraculous way right in front of our eyes all the time. And so by watching these things, and by, of course, by measuring and looking over time and comparisons, we have made the connections. And so not only, like I talked about before, about organization and symmetries and building beauty and that kind of seeking the truth of what the instructions are, how we, and how that links the infinite creator into, of course, love and beauty and all that kind of stuff. But this has, to do with bringing together what we have already. And so just to link in the previous talk that I did already about Mother Nature and Earth and holding space for us, and being number 2, coming second, right? and what that means. Already having things, already having something to work off of and with, this is where it makes sense and where we have truth defined in a different way. It's sort of a parable, it's sort of an analogy or metaphor, but she always already has something. And we're not going to ask, why does she already have something? Or how does she already have things? We're given the numbers, we're given the black and white by she came after already. She came after the already designated man, the thought, the first thing. And so we have, with the numbers displayed and the gathering of up with what's left over, this sort of truth that she can gather up what's already left over and make new with it. And so that's the truth of the pattern. That's why we're doing the equation. That's what that's why we do. We have nothing and we add 1. We have 1 and we add another, and now we have 2. We add what we have already, and now we have 3. And then we look back and we have, what do we have already? The 2 and the 3. We add them together and we have 5. Now what's the last thing? What do we have already? Now we're not keeping up with the whole, we'll forget the entire sequence as we move on as well. You only pick up what the last number there. So what's that foundational number that's behind? It's 8. Okay, well now we're going to add, the next 5 and 8 and get exactly 13. And then we're going to have 13. And we're going to look back and what do we have? We had 8. And we're going to add that, right? 21. And it's that truth spoken through numbers that I'm trying to kind of display and say that to understand that there's a foundational story behind the math of why we're doing the math, not just what it means. And how that story of taking things that we already have is about physical manifestation. It's about the earth materials. It's about stone. It's about trees. It's about the physical manifestations that the number 2 earth, Mother Nature, all signifies and symbolizes. Right? And it's so beautiful. And it's such a simple, clear idea of how do we keep going through our days and how do we move through physical life freely. We don't worry about the whole sequence of how we even got there before. It doesn't even matter. It's so simple. And of course, the projection of later is never even a worry, and it never comes into, it never comes to a point of contemplative projection into quote unquote the future space. That would be laughable. It's unexplainable. It has no purpose. There's no time for it when you live in the now moment. Think about how wildlife lives. Animals, the forest, trees, bees and plants and flowers. They aren't thinking about, anything except for the very moment of what they're doing. They're fully embodied in the exact moment. It takes, there's a deep faith and trust in that as well, because you can only be fully embodying into the whole act when you are, and when your consciousness is fully taken up with the now moment, everything that's happening now is so being observed, it's being looked at, it's being sensed and felt so fully. There's not a spectrum of time for later, right? And when we have the notion that later isn't in what's purposeful, it kind of becomes detrimental to be in the future, to be thinking. I mean, imagine if bunny rabbits could be off thinking in a field, and the fox could just sneak up on them. It's not quite, it's counterproductive, it's counterintuitive to organic flow. And when everything is always taken care of, you know, uh, and again, there's the accumulation of what's already there added to the now moment. And so even if there was ever a dull moment, or so to speak, there's a down moment, there's already the accumulation of things already there happening that very well will take up the time, you know? Basic things like eating or nesting or hibernation, drinking, bathing, you know? All of those things come from things that have already been had. The water's stored up, the food's on the ground, the food's been there. You know, these are all the things from the number before, so to speak, you know, that Mother Nature is holding in her hand, or that, you know, you would be holding in your own hand. You already have sort of the necessities in front of you. You don't need anything that you don't need at the very moment. It's kind of, this is like kind of a difficult thing to articulate. I'm glad I'm doing this sort of brainstorming session as well before I'm in the blog, like typing out things. It's so difficult sometimes for me. I get into writer mode where I'm more philosophical and sort of pondering out the processes versus actually just talking about the math, a bit like what I'm doing here, you know? And then I have this other side blog that I'm doing at the same time, which is more visuals and math and the numbers. That sort of anchors me back to getting into, you know, the meat of it, because I do feel that we have to have both of them, you know? I'm just looking at some of the pop-ups that I had, the pictures, the images that I'm going to use in the blog. I was kind of using them for visual references. But yeah, so that's pretty much it. This is a half an hour. I'm really going to leave it there, I guess. The thing I wanted to kind of lastly add in that I talked an hour around yesterday, didn't even get to, is sort of the sequence building and the dimensionality of it and what the numbers have to do with it. So not just the ratio between the numbers, which is what, you know, 1.618 sort of signifies and creates the motion for, but also what the numbers are doing and what the physicality happens. And then what the truth is, you know, what we can get from it and why we're doing it, you know. So that's my talk for today. Thanks for listening as always. And I will talk to you next time.